The proximity alarm shrieked. Elias Voss pressed his hand flat against the cold viewport. The Draxis embassy ship hung motionless against the stars. Its hull was a mosaic of polished copper and obsidian. No running lights, no docking request, just a silent arrival that should have triggered every alarm in the yard. Tess Calder leaned against the bulkhead behind him. She cracked her knuckles one at a time. "They didn't file standard approach," she muttered. Her voice carried a flat edge of contempt. "Reckon they think rules are for the help." Elias did not answer. He watched the vessel drift into the docking collar, the seals engaged. A vibration traveled through the deck plates. A diplomatic aide hurried through the hatch behind them. She was a younger woman in a pressed gray uniform. She clasped her hands too tightly. "The delegation is entering the dome now, Director," she said, her tone clipped and anxious. "They requested no escort." "Requested," Elias repeated. His voice was low and deliberate. He turned from the viewport. That word carried no weight here. The airlock cycled open. It hissed as pressure equalized. Varnak entered first. He stood a full head taller than any human in the room. His scales shifted from copper to deep emerald as he crossed the threshold. The color change rippled across his face and throat in a slow wave. He wore no visible clothing, only a harness of woven metal across his chest. Behind him came two scale guards. Their eyes were unblinking. Their hands were empty but poised. They took position on either side of the door. Varnak did not extend a greeting. He looked at the dome. He looked at the stars through the transparency. Then he looked at Elias. "Your orbital yard is inefficient," he said. His voice carried a low hum from a secondary chamber in his throat. It sounded like a distant engine idling. "The allocation of thermal baffles alone wastes 12% of your radiative capacity." Elias let the pause stretch. He had learned that silence made confident speakers uncomfortable. Then he spoke. "We built this yard from scrap in 6 years," he said flatly. "It works." Varnak's scales flickered. He did not acknowledge the point. He clasped his hands behind his back, 3 fingers interlaced. "The Draxis Remnant Council is prepared to offer humanity advanced psionic battery schematics," he said. His tone was formal and measured. "In exchange for a production contract, your factories will manufacture the components under our technical oversight." Tess pushed off the bulkhead. She folded her arms. "We already have batteries," she said. Her voice carried a hard edge of skepticism. "Not like these," Varnak replied. The hum in his throat deepened. Zelvok stepped forward from behind the scale guards. She was smaller than Varnak. Her build was leaner. Her frill was pressed flat against her skull. She carried a crystalline projector in her 3-fingered hand. Without asking permission, she placed it on the deck and activated it. A hologram rose into the air above them. It showed a lacework of energy channels. The channels were delicate and layered. They pulsed with amber light. The pulsing matched Zelvok's breathing. The battery core rotated slowly. Its internal structure was visible down to the sub-millimeter level. A psionic battery stores energy in a stabilized mental field. The field decays over time. Zelvok pointed to a cluster of dark nodes near the center. "This is the failure point," she said. Her voice was flat and clinical. "The donors are aging. Transfer efficiency degrades each cycle. We need 3,000 replacement cells in 18 cycles." She said it flat, a statement of fact, not a request. Elias looked at the hologram. The numbers formed in his head without conscious effort. The forge could output 400 cells per cycle if he gutted the current assembly lines. 3,000 in 18 cycles meant no margin, no other contracts, no maintenance downtime. He looked at Varnak. "What happens if we fail?" he asked. His voice was quiet. Varnak's scales darkened. The emerald bled into a deep, bruised violet. The color change traveled up his throat and settled behind his eyes. "The remnant zone collapses," he said. The hum in his voice dropped to a low growl. "We freeze, we starve, our species ends." Elias held his gaze. The room was silent except for the recycling fans and the low hum of Varnak's secondary throat. Tess looked at Elias. She shrugged one shoulder. It was not a gesture of indifference. It was a question. Elias turned back to the hologram. The energy channels pulsed. The dark nodes spread like cracks in ice. He made the decision before his conscious mind finished weighing it. "We will start production," he said firmly. "On human terms, no Draxis oversight." Varnak's head tilted. His scales flickered, copper to green to copper again. The silence stretched for 4 heartbeats, then 5. Finally, he inclined his head, a single, deliberate motion. "Acceptable," he said. His tone was grudging. The component schematics will be delivered within the watch cycle. He turned, he walked toward the airlock. Zelvok stayed a moment longer. She looked at Elias. Her frill flushed a pale blue. Her expression was unreadable. Then she followed Varnak. The scale guards fell in behind them. The airlock cycled shut. Elias did not move. His hand was steady against his thigh. The tremor had stopped. That was a bad sign. It only stopped when the risk was so large that his body stopped wasting energy on fear. Tess came up beside him. "That felt like a trap," she said. Her voice was low. "It is," Elias replied. His voice was flat. "Then why did you say yes?" she asked. She kept her tone sharp. "Because they are dying," he said. He looked at the hologram. "And we are the only people in the galaxy who build things fast enough to matter." Tess was quiet for a moment. "Then what?" "Then we hope the trap is worth the price of admission." He walked to the comm panel on the bulkhead. He keyed the internal channel. "This is Voss," he said. His voice was steady and commanding. "We are retooling all assembly lines. Priority override. I want the first plasma cutters hot in 30 minutes. The channel crackled with an acknowledgement. He closed the link. He looked at the hologram again. The dark nodes did not stop pulsing. They waited. He turned toward the maintenance hatch that led into the yard. The smell of hot metal drifted through the grating. He pushed through the hatch. He walked onto the catwalk above the assembly floor. The yard stretched below him, a cavern of steel and light and motion. Welders in heavy suits moved between partial hull sections. Crane arms swung in precise arcs. Sparks fell in bright curtains from the cutting beds. Elias stopped at the railing. He watched the first plasma cutter ignite. The blue-white arc cut through steel like it was paper. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Zelvok had not left. She stood at the far end of the catwalk. Her frill was still flushed pale blue. She was not looking at him. She was watching the welders below. Her eyes tracked their movements with an intensity that was not admiration, not contempt, something closer to grief. She knew something he did not. Elias felt the cold certainty settle deeper into his chest. The tremor in his hand did not return. The stamping press slammed down. Elias Voss walked the line with a tablet in his right hand. His left hand was tucked into his pocket to hide the tremor. He checked throughput against projections. The numbers were good, better than good. The line was running at 110%. His workers had added their own optimizations. A faster coolant valve. A reshuffled conveyor sequence cut dead time between stations. No one had asked permission. They had just done it. Zelvok stood at the inspection station. She held a finished cell in her three-fingered hands. She ran a diagnostic probe across its surface. The probe emitted a thin, high hum that cut through the press noise. Her frill flushed deep blue. That meant stress, or concentration. Elias had learned to read the color shifts over the last 3 days. She set the cell down. She turned to face him. "The tolerance is wider than Draxis artisans would accept," she said. Her voice was flat and critical. The subharmonic vibration in her throat added a low thrum to every word. Elias waited. She made a gesture with her free hand, a flick of 2 fingers. "But the cell holds charge within 1% of spec," she said. She paused. "Adequate." 1% is better than 0, Elias said. His tone was even. She did not respond. She reached for a second cell from the batch tray. She turned it over in her hands. Her sharp vision caught something her probe missed. She found a microscopic impurity in the coolant channel. She pointed at it. "A grain of silver sand," she said. "Barely visible, lodged in the interior wall. It will degrade the thermal transfer over time." Elias leaned over. He marked the entire batch for rework. He did not apologize. He tapped his tablet. He flagged the upstream station. It had missed the purge cycle. The line worker at Station 4, a man named Brody with grease ground into every crease of his hands, caught the flag. He let out a string of curses that carried through the clatter. He was already pulling the purge unit open before the order finished processing. Tess Calder's voice broke through the noise from the loading bay comm. "First batch is ready," she said. She sounded bored. She always sounded bored when she was not in a cockpit. 20 cells strapped and sealed. Elias tapped his earpiece. "Confirm seal integrity before release," he said. His voice was crisp. "Already done," Tess paused. "Do the Draxis want a manifest?" Zelvok turned toward the comm speaker. Her frill flickered. "We will verify in orbit," she said. Her tone was dismissive. Tess snorted over the open channel. "Suit yourself." The cargo drone hatch slammed shut. A metallic thud echoed through the bay. 3 hours later, Zelvok returned to the production floor. The change in her posture was subtle. Her shoulders were lower, she walked slower. "The 20 cells all passed field integration," she said. She held out a data chip. "Adjustments for the next batch." Elias took it without looking at it. He was watching the line. He tracked the rhythm of the stamping press as it dropped the next casing into the belt. Zelvok stood beside him. "The human manufacturing cycle is faster than any Draxis equivalent," she said. Her voice carried a note of reluctant admiration. Elias did not react. He turned. He walked towards Station 2. She followed. He showed her the new stamping die. The workers had developed it overnight, a modification to the forming press that shaved 6 seconds per cell. It looked crude, a slab of steel with a hand-ground edge, but it worked. Zelvok stared at it. Her frill flushed a rapid, freckled pattern. It was the first time Elias had seen that color. "Are all humans like this?" she asked. Her voice was uncertain. Elias looked at the line. He watched a woman at Station 7. Her left arm ended in a crude prosthetic, exposed cables and a clawed grip. She had a missing hand. She had replaced it with a tool that should have been retired 5 years ago. She caught a defect with her unaided eye. She waved the cell off the line before the sensor flagged it. The woman's precision was not trained. It came from something deeper, a desperation Elias knew too well. "Only the survivors," he said. His voice was low and quiet. Zelvok did not respond. She watched the woman work. Her frill held its freckled pattern, but her eyes had gone still. She was seeing something she could not process. The stamping press rattle shook the grime from the overhead pipes. A fine dust drifted down through the light. The heat from the coolant channel testing station hit Elias' face. A worker opened the oven door, a dry wave, thick and chemical. The third shift was due to relieve in 4 hours. The line was holding. Then the alarm screamed, not the production alert. A soft chime that called for supervisors, the fire siren, a single rising note that cut through every other sound on the floor. Elias was already running before his brain finished processing the tone. The smoke came from the coolant mixing tank, a steel vat the size of a ground car that sat at the far end of the line. Gray-black, oily, rolling fast. A worker was down. His name was Reyes. He was the night shift chemist. He had been checking the batch temperature, then something caught. The burns were visible from 30 meters, his right arm and the side of his face. Elias hit the emergency valve panel. He slammed his palm against the cutoff. The line shuddered and died around him. He turned toward the smoke. 5 people were already on it. No one called for help. No one waited for orders. They dragged hoses from the wall mount. They shut the feed valves by hand. One woman, a welder named Harlow, was on her knees under the tank. She turned the emergency drain with a wrench from her belt. The fire was out in 90 seconds, contained, dead. Elias knelt beside Reyes. The burns were severe. His skin was blistered and blackening at the edges. His eyes were open. He looked up at Elias. His voice was a rasp. Was the batch saved? Zelvok stood behind Elias. She watched the worker who had just been burned ask about the production run before he asked about his own life. She did not move. Her frill changed to a deep, steady cobalt. She did not speak. She had no language for what she was seeing. The medical bay door hissed open. Tess Calder walked to the bedside of a man she barely knew. His name was Deacon. He worked on the assembly line 3 stations down from her cargo bay. She had nodded at him in the corridors. That was the sum of their acquaintance. Now she watched the bandages soak through. A medic moved past her. He adjusted the drip. He said Deacon would live. Then he said Deacon's hands were gone. The flesh had melted to the bone during the flashover. The surgeons had taken what was left at the wrist. Tess said nothing. She heard the door hiss open. She did not turn. Elias Voss walked past her. He stood at the foot of the bed. His engineering coat was still smudged with soot. He had not changed in 12 hours. He looked at Deacon for a long moment. Then he spoke. He said the fire started in the coolant circulation manifold. The Draxis additive broke down under human process temperatures. It decomposed into a volatile gas. The ignition source was a static discharge from a worker's glove. The Draxis did not mention the additive. Tess heard the door hiss again. Smaller footsteps. A rhythmic click of 3-fingered hands against the doorframe. Zelvok stepped into the room. Her frill was flat against her skull. No blue, no copper undertone, just flat. Tess turned to face her. Zelvok said the additive was standard in all Draxis fabrication. She assumed the human engineers would adapt their process parameters. She assumed they would test the material before introducing it to the line. Tess felt her jaw tighten. She told Zelvok that the word for that assumption was negligence. Zelvok's frill did not move. She held Tess's gaze. She did not apologize. Elias stepped between them. He told Zelvok the batch specifications must change. Every chemical compound in the Draxis supply chain needed full documentation. No assumptions, no omissions. Zelvok said she would provide the data. The tension did not break. Tess watched Elias walk out. She followed him. They passed the shuttle bay on the way to his office. A transport from Earth had just landed. Tess saw a tall woman with braided gray hair stepping off the ramp. She carried a single bag. Myra Osei moved through the corridor. She had been awake for too long. She met Elias at his office door. She said the council was hesitant about the Draxis request. They had not approved anything yet. Elias nodded and let her in. Tess stayed in the doorway. Myra said the Draxis had asked about consciousness transfer technology. They wanted to know the process. They wanted to know the limitations. They wanted to know if it could be applied to non-human biology. Elias sat down at his desk. He said maybe that was the point. Myra touched her temple. She said the Draxis did not want to save dying specialists. They wanted to preserve skilled minds permanently. She said that was never the point of the technology. It was a medical mercy, not an industrial tool. Elias stared at the production chart on his wall. Tess stepped forward. She held out the datapad. The third batch of cells had a structural flaw. The crystal lattice formed microfractures during the cooling phase. The entire order would be delayed by 4 days. Elias closed his eyes. He did not speak for 10 seconds. Tess heard the clicking of the printing press in the corner. It was spitting out a new production schedule. The mechanical chatter filled the silence. She bit her thumbnail. The click of her teeth against the nail was the only other sound. Elias opened his eyes. He pulled open a drawer. He took out a metal plate. It was stamped, dented, and burned at the edges. He placed it on the desk in front of him. He said this was from the first rebuilt factory. He had pulled it out of the wreckage after the war. The factory was nothing but a frame. They found it after the war. The roof had collapsed. The lines were crushed. The workers were gone. He said the only thing that survived was the production line. It did not stop. It kept running. He said he would not let it stop now. Tess felt the weight of his words land in her chest. It was not inspiring. It was terrifying. Something had survived the war. It was not human resilience. It was the machine. Elias was telling her he would sacrifice anything to keep it running. She looked at Deacon's empty sleeves in her mind. The office door chimed. Elias tapped the console. Varnak's hologram flickered into existence above the desk. His scales were a deep, flat copper, no green, no anger. He said the battery failure had accelerated. The psionic core was degrading faster than the models predicted. The remnant zone had 18 cycles of reserve power. Then the lights would go out. Then the heat would stop. Then the Draxis would freeze. He said they needed the full 3,000 cells within 10 cycles, not 18. 10. The hologram shifted. Tess saw a city in twilight. The sky was dark. The streets were empty. In the center of the frame, the psionic battery dome flickered. Amber light pulsed like a failing heartbeat. Varnak said they would run out of time before humans ran out of excuses. Elias did not respond. He reached up and ended the transmission. He looked at the production chart. The lines needed to run at maximum capacity, around the clock. No maintenance stops, no downtime. 100% burn rate on equipment and crew. Myra said that would kill the workers. Elias said it would save them. Tess looked at the metal plate on his desk. She looked at the scar on his left hand. She looked at the production chart with its impossible deadline. She understood. The steel tide did not stop for anything. Not for burns, not for lost hands, not for exhausted crews. It just kept running. Elias Voss would ride it all the way down. The countdown clock glowed green. Myra Osei stared at it. 23 hours and 41 minutes remaining. She kept her eyes on the datapad in front of her. She did not want to watch the number drop. She set the pad down. She touched her temple once. The gesture was a habit she could not break. The Draxis request for consciousness transfer has no legal standing in human space, she said flatly. The process creates a copy. That copy is a person under our law. It has rights. It cannot be owned or discarded. Varnak's scales shifted from copper to a dull bronze. The low hum in his throat grew louder. Our people cannot afford philosophical debates, he said. His voice carried a sharp edge of impatience. The psionic battery is collapsing. We need experienced technicians. We need their minds copied into repair drones. The drones can work without rest. The copies will be treated with honor. Myra looked at him. She kept her voice flat. Will the original minds survive? Varnak hesitated. His secondary chamber pulsed once. A vibration felt in the chest rather than heard. Our intended transfer process is final, he said slowly. It drains the original into the copy. The original does not wake. Myra stood, her chair scraped against the deck plating. That is murder, she said. Her voice was cold. The room went still. Elias Voss rubbed his left hand. The tremor was visible under the table lights. He did not look at her. Is there any other way? He asked. His voice was rough. Zelvok spoke before Varnak could answer. Her frill flushed a deep blue, the color of stress. The failure is in a region too dangerous for living operators, she said. Her voice was tight. Radiation levels exceed Draxis tolerance by a factor of 8. The only alternative is to destroy the dome and rebuild. That will take longer than the timeline. Myra sat back down. She stared at the datapad, the words blurred. Tess Calder tapped the countdown clock. The green numeral wobbled. There might be another way, she said. That prototype weapon we tested. Elias looked up. He knew what she meant. The project was called the Void Torpedo. It was designed to use a phase-shift warhead to bypass solid matter. The effects on a live psionic field were entirely unpredictable. I'm not talking about destroying it, Tess continued, her voice matter-of-fact. I'm talking about lancing the core, creating a stabilization channel. A stabilization channel was a theoretical solution, a controlled path to vent the unstable energy. It would bore a narrow tunnel through the psionic field without causing a total collapse. The procedure was incredibly dangerous. Zelvok's frill flickered. You would be firing blind, she countered. The hum in her voice rose in pitch. The shot would have to pass through the primary battery lattice. The battery lattice was the crystalline heart of the power source. It was a delicate web of energy pathways. A direct hit meant catastrophic failure. The entire remnant zone would go dark. Not blind, Tess said. I can hold a mental lock on the torpedo. Her psionic rating was high enough for the attempt. A mental lock was a state of intense, direct thought control over a device's guidance system. It required absolute focus to steer the weapon through the chaotic energy field. Elias looked at his own production numbers. A column of figures glowed on a secondary display. He read them twice. We can build 3 torpedoes in the time it would take to retool for more cells, he said. The risk is extreme. The reward is avoiding this transfer protocol altogether. Varnak and Zelvok exchanged a look. Their mouths did not move. A series of subsonic pulses passed between them. Myra felt the vibration in her ribs. She could not tell whose voice was whose. Varnak turned back to the table. The Draxis will allow the torpedo attempt, he said. His tone was grudging. If it fails, we will pursue the transfer solution, with or without human cooperation. Myra heard the words. She understood the threat. Her ethical objections would not stop them. The Draxis would perform the transfer anyway. They would take the technology. They would build their own array and copy the human technicians. Those technicians had already agreed to the original process. The copies would have no rights. They would be tools. She could walk away, or she could stay. She could ensure the copies were treated as people. She laid her hand flat on the table. The metal was cold. If the torpedo fails, she said firmly, I will supervise the transfer protocol. I will write the legal framework. The copies will have full personhood rights under human law. Varnak tilted his head. His scales shifted to a shade Myra had not seen before, a dark violet, almost black. That is acceptable, he said. His voice was measured. Elias let out a breath. He did not look relieved. Tess Calder stood. She pushed her chair back with her boot. I will fly the torpedo run, she said. Her tone was resolute. I need one clear shot. I need a working targeting lock. Elias looked at her. His voice was quiet. The torpedo has a 35% success rate in simulation. Tess smiled. It was not a warm expression. The simulation never had me flying it. She walked out. The door closed behind her. The clock kept ticking. Myra watched the green numerals count down, 23 hours and 12 minutes. The room felt smaller now. The air was stale. It was heavy with recycled oxygen and the faint chemical smell of the Draxis. Elias picked up a coffee mug. He set it down too hard. The clink cut through the silence like a fracture line. I need to talk to my production team, he said. We have torpedoes to build. He left. Zelvok remained. Her frill had faded to a pale gray. She looked at Myra. Her eyes did not blink. You believe we are monsters, she said. Her voice was soft. Myra shook her head. I believe you are desperate, she said. Desperate people make choices. They would not make those choices otherwise. Zelvok's frill flushed again, a faint blue at the edges. The original donors volunteered, she said. They knew they would not wake. They chose to give their minds so that others could live. Myra said nothing. Zelvok stood. She walked with a deliberate swaying motion. The motion carried her toward the door. We are not monsters, she said. We are survivors. She left. Myra sat alone in the low light. The clock ticked, 23 hours and 7 minutes. She touched her temple again. She thought about the copy. It would be made. A person would wake inside a machine. That person would be aware that the original was gone, aware that they were the one left behind. She would write the framework. She would make sure that copy was protected. It felt like defeat. It tasted like ash in her mouth. But she stayed at the table. The alternative was worse. Tess Calder stepped onto the gantry. It vibrated under her boots. The void torpedo hung 4 meters above her. It was suspended from magnetic cradles. Its surface was dark steel, cold and unreflective. The hum came from deep inside it. A vibration settled in her teeth. She ran her gloved hand along the hull of the fighter frame. The torpedo was slung underneath it like a pregnant belly. A stripped-down hull with no weapons, no armor, and barely enough engine to reach combat velocity. She stepped back. She looked at the whole assembly. A scrapyard abortion held together with hope and welding code. I'm naming it Bang Bang, she said. Her voice was dry. Nobody laughed. The technician on the gantry kept his head down. He checked cable connections. Elias Voss stood at the edge of the launch bay. His arms were crossed. His face was unreadable. Zelvok worked at a portable console. Her 3-fingered hands moved with precise, nervous gestures. Her frill was flat against her skull. That meant stress. Tess filed that away. Zelvok looked up. The targeting data is loaded, she said. Her voice was clipped and professional. I have uploaded the battery lattice coordinates into your system. Good, Tess said. She kept her tone neutral. We never built a weapon like this. Zelvok paused. Her scales flickered copper to green, a slow shift. I do not know if the phase-through effect will interact with the psionic field. The mathematics suggest it will be stable. The mathematics have been wrong before. Tess shrugged. We'll find out. Elias walked toward her. His boots rang on the gantry grating. He stopped close, too close for comfort. She could see the tremor in his left hand, then he shoved it into his pocket. There's no escape trajectory, he said. His voice was strained. I know. The torpedo detonates on contact. The fighter needs to be at least 8 kilometers away to avoid the dimensional shockwave. You have a 3-second window. Tess grinned. That's plenty. Elias did not smile. It's not plenty, it's barely enough. The engines would need to spool perfectly. They never spool perfectly. Then I'll make it work. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, not agreement. Surrender, he knew she was going regardless. The technician walked over. He was young, early 20s. A fading bruise on his jaw. His eyes looked too old for his face. He held out a data pad. For you, he said. His voice was quiet. Tess took it. The screen showed a single line of text. If you don't come back, I'm naming the next one Bang Bang to. She looked up. The technician had already turned away. She saw the corner of his mouth twitch. She laughed. A broken, sharp sound. It echoed in the cold bay. I like that kid, she said. She handed the datapad back to Elias. She tucked her helmet under her arm. She walked toward the ladder. It led up to the cockpit. The hull was cold through her gloves. She climbed. The cockpit was tight. The training manuals called it a pilot's coffin. She settled into the seat. The harness clicked across her chest. She pulled the helmet on and sealed it. The air cycled in, cold and clean and metallic. She ran the pre-flight. Systems green, engines nominal. The torpedo guidance system reported low vibration through the cockpit floor, a hum in the bones. She closed her eyes and felt it, a heartbeat. It was not her own. She opened a channel to the bay. Bang Bang is ready, she said. Her voice was steady. Elias' voice came back. It was flattened by the calm. Launch bay venting atmosphere in 10 seconds. She felt the change. The air around the ship thinned. The vibration changed pitch. The ship was no longer inside the station. She was already in the void. 5 seconds. She gripped the controls. Launch. The acceleration slammed her into the seat. Her vision narrowed. The fighter screamed into the dark. The Draxis remnant zone appeared on the nav display, a dying star of amber light. The battery dome was at its center, vast and fragile, a glass bubble holding a sun. She adjusted course. The torpedo's guidance system locked on. A green indicator blinked steady. Then it wavered. The lock slipped. The phase lock indicator flickered red, psionic interference. The battery's energy field was bleeding out. It scrambled every sensor on the fighter. "Come on," she muttered. Her voice was tight. She jammed the switch to manual. The lock disappeared. She was flying blind. She aimed at a target. She could barely see it through a canopy streaked with static. She dropped the nose. The fighter plunged into the atmosphere. Energy particles streaked past the canopy, crackling orange lines like burning silk. Rain made of fire. The hull groaned. Temperature warnings flashed. She ignored them. 200 meters, the dome filled her view. The lattice was visible now, a web of amber light. It pulsed slow like a dying heartbeat. She needed a lock just for a second. She centered the crosshairs. The torpedo's guidance system flickered, a partial lock, red to yellow to green. She fired. The torpedo dropped from the frame. It fell for a moment, clean and straight. Then it phased. The hull went translucent, then invisible. It passed into the dome without touching it. The amber light swallowed it whole. The detonation was silent. The shockwave followed. Tess saw it coming, a ripple of black and white. It folded space in on itself. It expanded faster than sound, faster than light on the display. The engines were spooling, the fighter was turning, but the wave was faster. She did the math in her head, 3 seconds to the 8-kilometer mark. She had 2. She closed her eyes. She did not scream. She waited. The shockwave hit, but it did not tear her apart. It passed through the hull. It passed through her. It was cold, so cold, a cold sensation. It felt like absence, like a space where something had been. That something was now gone, then it passed. She opened her eyes. The canopy was clear. The static was gone. The amber light of the battery dome was steady now. A soft, constant glow, not dying, holding. She looked at the nav display. Her ship was inside a bubble, a sphere of normal space. The dimensional wave had bent around the fighter there. The torpedo's phase effect had interacted with the psionic field. The mathematics never predicted this way. She was alive. She laughed. A single choked sound. It hurt her throat. "Bang bang to Titan Forge," her voice cracked. "The battery is stable. Repeat, the battery is stable. Countdown is frozen at 3 days, 11 hours. A long pause, then Elias' voice, raw and quiet. "Copy that, Mantis. Good work." She looked at the display again. The engines were dead. Life support was draining. She had maybe 4 hours of air. "One problem," she said. "I'm dead in the void, life support failing." Elias did not answer immediately. Then he spoke. His voice was steady. "We're already working on a rescue plan. Myra is pulling together a retrieval team. Hang tight, Mantis." She leaned back in the seat. The cold was seeping through the hull now. She looked at the amber light, steady, holding. She had saved them. The price had not yet been recorded. The rescue shuttle shuddered. Myra extended the manipulator arm. The metal claw reached across the gap. It clamped onto the fighter's emergency ring. She felt the slight give through the control interface. The hull was compromised. "Tess," Myra said into the comm. Her voice was urgent. "Status." A pause, then Tess's voice came through, thin and slow. "I'm fine." "You are not fine," Myra said. Her tone was sharp. "Cockpit is flooding with coolant," Tess said. Her voice was weak. "Maybe 20 minutes of air left, maybe less." Myra looked at the pressure readout. The fighter's cabin was losing atmosphere. The rescue arm held firm. The airlock cycle on her own shuttle had failed. A red light blinked instead of the green. She made a decision. Myra pulled the EVA suit from its locker. The seals were not designed for her size. She craned the helmet into place anyway. The oxygen hissed against her face. "What are you doing?" Elias' voice crackled over the command channel. It was sharp with alarm. "Going out," she said. Her voice was calm. "Myra, the fighter's unstable." "Then I will be quick." She cycled the inner door. The outer door opened onto darkness and silence. The stars did not move. Tess's fighter hung beside her. It was dented and burnt. A thin stream of white vapor bled from a split in the canopy. Myra kicked toward it. She trailed a tether. The canopy resisted her first pull. The emergency release was jammed. She drew the plasma knife from her belt. She ignited it. The blade glowed orange. She cut through the metal. The sparks were too bright. They painted the inside of her visor with dancing afterimages. The metal gave way. She peeled it back. Tess was hunched in the pilot's seat. Her helmet was fogged. A cut on her scalp dripped blood down her cheek. Her eyes were wide and unfocused. Myra grabbed her arm. It was cold. She pulled. Tess came loose from the seat. She slid into Myra's grip. The tether caught them both. "I have her," Myra said. Her voice was breathless. She dragged Tess through the hatch. She sealed the inner door, the pressure equalized. Myra dropped to her knees, she pulled Tess's helmet off. Tess breathed. It was ragged, but it was breathing. Myra looked at Tess's hand. It was wrapped around something, a small metal chip, the guidance module from the Void torpedo. "What is that?" Myra asked. Her voice was curious. Tess opened her palm. The chip was intact. "The only part that worked perfectly," Tess said. Her voice was a whisper. Myra did not answer. She helped Tess sit up. She reached for the medkit. The shuttle docked at the forge 30 minutes later. Elias was waiting in the bay. His face was drawn. His hand was still. "Report," Myra said. Her tone was flat. Elias let out a breath. "The battery is holding," he said. "The remnant zone has power." Varnak requested a joint commission on industrial cooperation. "Victory, then." "Victory," Elias said. His voice was hollow. Myra walked Tess to the medical bay. The medics took over. They scanned her brain. The autodoc beeped. It was rhythmic. It sounded like a slow heartbeat. Myra stood in the corridor. She waited. The medics came out. Their faces were wrong. "What is it?" Myra asked. Her voice was tight. The senior medic held a data slate. "Tess's exposure to the psionic field during the detonation," he said grimly. "It degraded her neural architecture. The damage is progressive." "How progressive?" "She will lose motor function within weeks," he said. "Conscious thought within months. There is no treatment." Myra looked through the window. Tess was sitting on the bed. She looked small. She looked calm. Myra went inside. Tess looked up. Her eyes were clearer now. "They told you." "They told me." "The consciousness transfer," Tess said. Her voice was steady. "Will the copy be me?" Myra sat down. She wanted to say yes. She did not believe the copy would be Tess. The original brain would die. A perfect duplicate would wake in a synthetic body. It would remember everything. But it would not be the same person. She could not say that. "I do not know," she said. Her voice was soft. Tess nodded. "I don't care." "You should care." "What matters is that the copy remembers what I did," Tess said. "It can keep working. The production line needs a pilot. That pilot must understand the torpedo." Myra stared at her. "Make the copy," Tess said. Her tone was firm. Myra nodded. She could not find the words. 3 hours later, she authorized the transfer. The original Tess was sedated. The process took 40 minutes. The brain scanned and copied. The synthetic body was prepared. The transfer completed with a single chime. The copy woke. It sat up. It moved its hands. It looked at Myra with Tess's eyes. They were not Tess's eyes. They were synthetic and calm. "Status report on the production line," it said. Its voice was flat. Myra could not answer. "Status report," the copy said again. Its tone was insistent. "The line is operational," Myra said. Her voice was barely a whisper. The copy nodded. "Good, I will return to duty in 12 hours. Myra stood there. Something had been lost. She could not name it, but she felt the shape of its absence in the room. The copy did not notice. It was already reviewing the data from the torpedo run. It ran diagnostics on its own new body. It planned the next mission. It did not ask about Tess. It did not know it should. Varnak turned from the viewport. The scales on his neck shifted to a dull bronze. No anger, just weariness. Elias Voss sat at the central table. His hands were flat on the polished surface. His left hand trembled less than before. He was not sure if that was recovery or resignation. The observation dome smelled different now. Coffee mixed with the faint citrus bite of Draxis resin. The two scents had become a single thing over the past 3 weeks. The Draxis ship remained docked outside. Human cargo vessels had moored alongside it now. The umbilical lines pulsed with steady traffic. Varnak opened his mouth. The low hum from his throat resonated through the dome. "The Remnant Council has reviewed the production data," he said. His voice was formal. "Human output exceeded all projections by a factor of 4. Elias said nothing. "We will not impose technical oversight," Varnak said. His tone was concessional. "The Council has withdrawn that demand." Elias waited. "Instead, we request a joint research initiative," Varnak said. "Shared development, not supervision." Elias leaned back in his chair. He looked at Varnak's eyes. The vertical pupils were fixed on him. "What do you contribute?" he asked. His voice was flat. Varnak's scales rippled. "We will share psionic battery technology without reservation," he said. "We will train your engineers in energy architecture, full knowledge transfer." Elias let the silence stretch. The coffee smell was stronger now. Someone had refilled the pot. The copy of Tess spoke from the corner of the table. Its voice was identical. The cadence was slightly off. A pause too long between words, a stress on the wrong syllable. "The training is a good offer," it said. Its tone was neutral. It stood, the synthetic body moved with precision but not fluency. The hands opened and closed once, as if testing. "I need to check on the new torpedo prototypes," it said. It walked out. The door hissed closed behind it. Elias watched the door for a long moment. Then he turned back to Varnak. "We accept the terms," he said. "With one addition. The joint initiative includes medical data exchange, neural mapping specifically." Varnak's head tilted. "Accepted." Myra Osa stepped out of the doorway. She had been observing without speaking. Her braided gray hair caught the dome light. She touched her temple. "Elias," she said. "A word." He followed her into the corridor. The hum of the cargo vessels vibrated through the deck plates. A constant background now. Normal. "The copy is destabilizing," Myra said. Her voice was low. Elias felt the words land in his chest. "The neural mapping captured the moment of trauma," Myra said. "The psionic shockwave, she is reliving the 3-second wait in cycles." "Can it be fixed?" Elias asked. His voice was strained. "I do not know," Myra said. "The copy is perfect. That is the problem. The fear was mapped exactly. She remembers being afraid. She remembers the exact chemical state. But she does not feel the emotion, just the memory of it." Elias looked down at his hand. The tremor was still there. "She asked me a question yesterday," Myra said. "She asked if she was the original." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," Myra said. Her voice was tired. "I do not know." Elias nodded. He walked past her. The production floor was 3 decks down. The assembly bay was quieter than he had ever heard it. The lines were running at 40% capacity. The immediate crisis was over. The workers moved with slow precision instead of desperate speed. He stopped at the torpedo cradle. A new prototype sat in the clamps. The casing was raw steel, cold forged. The energy baffles shimmered at the edges. Someone had painted a sigil on the hull, a silver shape, a mantis, Tess's call sign. Elias called the line chief over. A woman named Durand. She had been on the floor since the war. "Who painted that?" Elias asked. His voice was curious. Durand looked at the torpedo. "We did," she said. Her voice was quiet. "All of us." "Why?" "We want the next pilot to have better luck," she said. Elias looked at the silver paint. It was still tacky. It caught the dome light from the observation window above. He felt the weight of the system. He had built it. Every ton of steel, every second shaved from production, every worker who had pushed past exhaustion, every cell that had passed inspection. The cost was not measured in credits. He walked back to the observation dome alone. Varnak was still there. He stood at the viewport. He watched the cargo vessels cycle through their docking routines. Elias stood beside him. They did not look at each other. "What is the human term?" Varnak said slowly. "For the feeling when you win but you have lost something irreplaceable." Elias thought about it. "Victory," he said. His voice was dry. Varnak was silent for a long moment. His scales shifted to a deeper bronze. "That is not a word in my language," he said. They stood in silence. The coffee had gone cold. The Draxis resin smell had faded to something faint. Elias gave the order 2 hours later. He found Zelvak in the production office. She was reviewing a schedule on the terminal. Her frill was a steady blue, calm. "We are scaling back production," Elias said. His voice was firm. "The immediate crisis is over. The lines will not run at maximum burn again, not unless there is no other choice." Zelvak nodded. Her frill fluttered once. "I understand," she said. Her voice was soft. She turned back to the terminal. The schedule changed. The production numbers dropped. Elias left her there. The copy of Tess found him in the dome at sunset. The light through the viewport was orange and gold. The cargo vessels cast long shadows across the dock. She stood in the doorway. The synthetic body cast its own shadow. "Did I do enough?" she asked. Her voice was hesitant. Elias turned to face her. Her eyes were the same color. Her face was the same shape. Something was different. She held her shoulders in a new way. "Yes," he said, "you did enough." She hesitated. The pause was too long. "Sometimes I cannot remember the 3-second wait correctly," she said. "I remember being afraid, but not the feeling of fear, just the fact of it." She looked at her hands. The fingers flexed. "I am not sure if I am the same person," she said. Elias stepped closer. He stopped an arm's length away. "That does not matter to me," he said. "You are still Tess." She looked at her hands again. The silver light from the torpedo marks caught her synthetic skin. "The answer is not enough," she said, "but it is all you can give." It was not a question. It was a statement. She had already analyzed the data. Elias did not have a better answer. She left without saying goodbye. The door hissed closed. Elias stood alone in the dome. The first shipment of psionic battery cells was leaving. The cargo vessel detached from the dock. The thrusters fired. The ship pulled away. No one celebrated. Myra found him an hour later. She stood in the doorway. The light from the corridor made her shadow long. "The Joint Commission is ratified," she said. "The Draxis will share energy technology. We will supply industrial capacity." Elias nodded. "The galaxy still thinks we are broken," Myra said. Her voice was wry. Elias looked at the viewport. The cargo vessel was gone. The dock was empty. "I wonder if it was ever any different," he said. Myra said nothing. She walked to the table. She picked up the cold coffee cup. She set it down again. Elias looked at the production chart on the terminal. The numbers were green. The targets were met. The crisis was over. The cost of survival was not measured in credits. It was measured in a pilot. That pilot was no longer entirely human. It was measured in a planet. That planet was no longer entirely self-sufficient. It was measured in an alliance built on exhaustion. The cost was still being counted. Elias touched his left hand. The tremor was still there. It would always be there. He looked at the viewport. The stars were the same as they had always been. Cold, distant, indifferent. The steel tide had receded. The shore was different now. He did not know if that was victory.